What is going on, everyone? Welcome here into the Voice of College Football, the Oregon Live Show with me and Spaz tonight. How are you doing, Spaz?
Doing good. Great day today. Got some recruits committed. Yeah, it's a great day. The new video. If you haven't checked it out, that is a very phenomenal video that Oregon team just put out again. 25-minute on the history of Oregon and Phil Knight and Oregon sports. Very classy. If you haven't checked it out yet, it's called Rooted in Substance. It's on YouTube, and check it out. You'll be impressed, I believe.
That is right. And everyone in the chat, thank you. Appreciate it. Please do join us tonight. Hit that like button. Consider subscribing. Check out Mark Rogers, new sponsor in the description section of this video for SNHU. But without further ado, we appreciate the man himself right here to talk to all of us newbies and freshmen going into the Big 10. A man who knows it no better maybe than himself. I mean, obviously, very knowledgeable. Welcome in, Big 10, Ted.
How we doing?
What's up, Ted?
It's great to be here. Great to be here. Great to talk Ducks, and the kind of connecting with a lot of these new fan bases. Oregon, man, you guys are excited. You guys are pumped. And some of y'all think you're going to come into the Big Ten and then play in Indy. And you very well could. You very well could. But I'm excited to see exactly how it's going to shake out. So it's really good to hear talking Big Ten, talking Ducks once again.
Well,
great to have you.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here. Like I said, anytime you have to give to us is just more information we can take in, because you have been high on the Ducks. I have watched a bunch of your stuff. Yeah. And obviously we're high on the Ducks, but joining a new conference is a whole different beast. You never know how it's going to go. You feel like you're set up for success, and then you can end up like Nebraska.
Well, yeah, I just came from
not because you're in the corner.
I just came from recording my Nebraska season preview. Shout out John Johnston of Coordination, great guest right there. So excited for everybody to see that. But yeah, it's there's so many different takes on some West Coast teams coming into the Big 10. You talked about how exactly maybe Oregon is going to do. This is an Oregon team this year. They got Ohio State on the schedule. They've got Michigan in the first week of November, which should be very interesting. Wisconsin on the road in the middle of November. Oregon also, hey, I'll say this. Big Ten maybe didn't do them any favors scheduling. I believe it was 8 consecutive games before they have that second bye, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be interesting. I think Oregon is going to face some of these teams in the Big Ten that are good most years, right? Wisconsin is maybe a little bit notch below, maybe the Michigan and Ohio States of the world that they have on the schedule. But there are some other teams on that schedule that may surprise Oregon, and we may get into that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've seen the schedule we've looked at. We did kind of a review of it. It's not the worst schedule. Let's put it that way.
No, it's not. No.
Not the worst schedule. I mean, I think Spaz would agree. It could have been way worse. I mean,
it could have been worse. Yes,
it could have been.
We got Penn State this year.
No Penn State on the schedule.
No Iowa.
No Iowa. No Nebraska. Teams like that. Those are really good defenses, right? So it's not the best. It's not the worst. I think is a good way to kind of characterize their first Big Ten schedule.
So, in all fairness too, and I apologize, I haven't watched enough to see, because you cover all the Big Ten,
Yep.
And you are very, as another person here said, well, Blue Wolverine, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate it. Yes, and as much as it pained us to see the Pac-12 die, at the same time, we ended up in the best situation that we could have. So,
oh yeah,
it's kind of sunk in a little bit finally.
to me, it's not going to sink in until, Oregon takes the field against Idaho. And I'll say this. It is not going to sink in until Oregon plays Idaho and you see that Big 10 Network logo in the corner, because that first game against the Vandals will be on BTN. I think their second one, Boise State, is on Peacock as well. So that's when it's going to start to sink in. And I'd have to pull up their schedule here in just a minute, but I think their first Big 10 game is actually against UCLA. So it's like, that's still pretty normal. That's not too different, but the next week, but here's the weird thing. The next week they play Michigan State, and you have Jonathan Smith, you got Aiden Childs, you got that great tight end whose name is escaping me right now from Oregon State. But I think they brought in a lot of Beavers, is what I'm trying to say, into East Lansing, Michigan. So although it's going to be different, right, with the Sparty logo and the green uniforms and all that, there's going to be a lot of familiarity in game number 2 when they play the Spartans, because there's a lot of Oregon State flavor on that team.
And we've done a home and home with the Spartans too, so it still kind of feels somewhat normal. Maybe it wasn't that long ago we just did the home and home. It was 14 and 15, but it was, thinking about that, when you see the Big 10 logo, I think it'll be when you see the field with the Big 10 logo, because the basketball team just unveiled their new court today in Oregon with the Big 10 logo on it.
Well, here's one thing that's, should I say perplexing? I don't know if it is. I've seen Oregon's new basketball court with the Big 10 logo on it. I think USC, I think it was their women's basketball Twitter, said they've got the Big 10 logo, yet we've seen nothing from football fields. Nothing from football fields. I've seen Texas have, they did a short video with the SEC logo, yet we haven't seen anything. So that's like, we're unveiling basketball courts before we are football fields, which is a little bit weird to me, but I'm sure as we get closer to football season, these social media teams, Oregon, by the way, when it comes to creative video and social media, it's very tough to beat what Oregon was able to do. Some great video storytelling with the Ducks versus them series last year. Now, that's when I started. Maybe they've been doing this for a couple of years, but that's when obviously with Oregon announced to come to the Big 10 in August, I was really able to start watching those, and their creative team does a phenomenal job.
How long ago did they
that's when
start
it really picked up.
How long ago did they really start that? Because this last year, though, it definitely, they elevated those videos.
I think it just really elevated this last year, because I don't remember a lot of crazy videos coming out until the us versus the Colorado was the first one that I really just blew my mind. I was just like, wow.
That was fantastic. Just the awareness. I work in television production and kind of video and stuff, so I kind of have an eye for some of these things, but just being in the right spot, for some of those pregame warm-ups and stuff from the chatter from some of those Colorado players. And by the way, that game, you could see that coming a mile away, that result from a mile away. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We've moved on. Although Nebraska does match up against Colorado, so I at least got to know a little bit about the Buffs going into that week 2 matchup. But we're here to talk Ducks. We're here to talk Ducks. But yeah, they do a great, just marketing. If you want to know about sports marketing, just look at what Oregon is able to do, right? You mentioned that Nike documentary that just came out today. Haven't had time to watch it yet, but I've seen a lot of the teasers and a lot of the trailers for it. Very exciting, and I'm sure that's going to lead into, I know they're kind of mixing things up with their uniforms this year. Well, it is a football game. It is a season, so naturally Oregon's going to have a new set of uniforms, but I'm excited to see what they roll out in the Big 10 schedule from a uniform perspective.
The Generation O release comes tomorrow. But
just tomorrow. Okay. Cool. Exciting. Really excited. Because it's like when you think of Oregon's uniforms, right? You think of the combinations. It's very new school, right? But then you look at Big 10 uniforms, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan. They're very traditional. It's a solid color with an accent color. The helmets, right, are very traditional. It's just everything Big 10 screams tradition. And then you got Oregon kind of coming in and kind of mixing it up. But I'm excited to see Oregon and Michigan, their uniforms on the same football field. as well, and kind of some of these other combinations. Like I'm from Wisconsin. I am a Badger fan. I'm excited to see those Oregon uniforms at Camp Randall Stadium later this season as well. So yeah, it's gonna be really fun to see some of these traditional Big Ten uniforms against the flash and the substance, of course, that is Oregon.
Well, that's something I was going to ask you because I watched a lot of your stuff and maybe I'd missed it. I was going to say, what team are you a fan of? You're a Wisconsin fan, so I was going to say, depending on what fan base you are, what worries you now that Oregon is playing Wisconsin? What worries you about playing Oregon by chance?
Yeah, and that specific game late in the season, when I'm looking at things from a Wisconsin perspective, early, and of course, the coaching staff changed over with Luke Fickell coming as a head coach last year. Mike Tressel, who has a lot of Big Ten experience, worked with Luke Fickell at Cincinnati. He worked on a Michigan State coaching staff at one time as well during the heyday of Mark D'Antonio. But when I look at Wisconsin specifically, it's matching up with all the weapons, because I really like Wisconsin, what they have in the secondary. Hunter Wohler, I think, is one of the best safeties in the country. Ricardo Hallman was an interception machine last year over there at corner. But beyond that, where's the depth to cover if Oregon can put Tez Johnson on the football field and Gary Bryant on the football field and Trayshawn Holden on the football field and Evan Stewart on the football field, Jaron Dickey, I could keep on going and going and going with all these weapons that Oregon has been able to come in. And I think that's where you create the mismatches, right? If you can come in and you can line up 4 wide receivers, you can line up 11 personnel with 3 receivers and a tight end, right? This is a tight end room at Oregon. I think that also has, like, a lot of people are look at that wide receiver room with Tez and Evan and some of the other guys that I mentioned. It's great. It's maybe one of the best wide receiver rooms in all of college football. But that tight end, and then you look at quarterback with Gabriel, and then you look at running back, a lot of attention's going there. But that tight end room is pretty darn good as well, right? The Big Ten, we know tight ends, but this is such a hybrid type of tight end room. Like, I look, Terrence Ferguson's really good, Patrick Herbert. But then, like, this is a guy, like, I'm kind of preaching to Big Ten fans here. Kenyon Sadiq is someone that is almost like a unicorn to me at the tight end position. That third tight end for Oregon, I saw him in the spring game and in the Fiesta Bowl when he got more action. You're sending tight ends on jet sweeps. You're getting them involved in the run game. Okay, that's pretty different from what we're used to, right? And I just love the creativity that Will Stein has with that as a weapon. I think that's where Oregon really worries some teams, is they're going to overwhelm you with what they have on the football field. And when you have 3 returning offensive linemen from one of the best offensive lines in the country, especially that tackle combination with Johnny Cordelius with Connerly, right? Josh Connerly at the other side as well. It's going to be tough to, I think, get a pass rush on them as well. So they're going to have to get creative with that as well. So you got to start fast against Oregon, right? You can't allow them to just create that momentum early, because I feel if like that happens, it could really steamroll against Wisconsin. So we'll see. We'll see exactly how that goes. We'll see what the weather is like that time of year. Growing up in the Midwest, right? I know, it could be 50 degrees and sunny. It could be 5 degrees and snowing, So, wait 5 minutes. The weather is going to change in the Midwest. I think a couple of years back, maybe a handful of years back, I live in the Twin Cities of Minnesota now. Minnesota and Iowa played at Minnesota, and it was single digits, and it was we'll just say middle of November. I can't remember the exact week, but then the next year, Minnesota was playing that same week, and it was like 50 degrees. Right. So it's very different from year to year. Right. It changes in November, and and the weather, like you guys are up in the Pacific Northwest. So it's kind of the northern part. You're kind of, it's not Minnesota. It's not Wisconsin. I will say that it's a different kind of cold. Like the wind is something that a lot of people don't take into consideration as well. Some of these lake effects, right, coming off of, some of these Wisconsin at Northwestern and some of these like Michigan, right, some of these other places. But so that all needs to be taken into consideration. But it's going to be a big challenge, right, when Oregon faces the field against some of these Big Ten defenses.
I will say, just to let you know too, as mentioned, I'm actually, I grew up in Oregon, but I'm in Houston, but I lived a year and a half in North Dakota.
Oh,
So I
baby,
am
you are speaking my language.
I'm very used to that.
My first job out of college was working in. I was a TV sports reporter at the Fox affiliate in Fargo, North Dakota. So this does not mean Texas. I know you're living in Houston now. Horns up for the Bison all day, every day. I covered North.
Don't get me started with the Bison, dude.
I covered North Dakota State football for 2 years in press conferences with Chris Kleiman, who's now the head coach at Kansas State. Really good guy. You look at Matt Entz, right? Of course, who was on the coaching staff as well. I just missed David Braun, who was the DC at NDSU, who eventually became the head coach, of course, at Northwestern, and that great year last year. But NDSU is a coaching factory, and that is a rabid fan base in Fargo.
It is.
So
it was crazy. Those fans are nuts up there.
They are, man. I'll never forget it. We're out doing some pregame stuff, a playoff game. I think they were playing James Madison at the time in a semifinal. So it would have been their last game before they went to Frisco. It's single digits outside. North Dakota State, for those that don't know, playing an indoor dome, about 15, 20,000 people, maybe something like that. Maybe a little bit more. I can't exactly remember what the Fargo Dome really holds, but you've got people outside tailgating, shirtless. It's single degree weather. The batteries on our camera are dying within like 30 to 40 minutes. We can barely get outside and interview people to kind of send this stuff back to the station. And I grew up in Wisconsin, so it was very much like a Green Bay Packers atmosphere over there, which also speaks to the rabid fan base that is the Green Bay Packers, the college-like fan base that is the Packers. But NDSU, man, those 2 years in Fargo, those were some great years. Those were some great games to be able to cover. It's a different type of football up there, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was saying was, NDSU. I lived in Minot, and 2 years ago when Oregon was playing Georgia, it was about to be broadcast, and they're like, we're now cutting to the NDSU game versus this. I'm like, are you shitting me right now? Like, no. I had to go find a live stream because I had a post game to have to do after it, and where I suffered for an hour talking about that humiliating loss.
We talk about the wind. The wind, especially in the December, January, February months in Fargo, it is as flat. If you know anything about North Dakota and South Dakota, but if you know anything about North Dakota, it's flat as a pancake out there. It's flat as the eye can see. And when that wind, there's nothing to disrupt the wind. And when it is cold and it is windy, I still don't know how my 1999 Mercury Cougar made it through 2 winters in Fargo, North Dakota without any major issues. And I didn't have indoor parking right next to the West Fargo Fairgrounds. So yeah, it's crazy, man. That was almost 10 years ago. Wow, that's crazy. But yeah, Fargo, that's a totally different game. It's crazy. I can't imagine them playing outside. They moved indoors, I think, sometimes in the 2000s when they moved from Division II.
Well, I mean, I'd say you couldn't, but there are teams that do.
They do. South Dakota State has an outdoor stadium.
Minot State's outdoors.
Yep, a lot of, but yeah.
Well, no, they do have a dome now, but their practice field is outside, so I don't know what they do. But
a lot of those. North Dakota is indoors. South Dakota is indoors. What's uni? The Northern Iowa is indoors. North Dakota State is indoors. So really, South Dakota State, I think, in that area is one of the few that does have an outdoor stadium. So it's a different kind of football in that area for sure.
Our channel has been invaded by Michigan.
Shocking.
There's like 10 of them out here.
I think John just said they finished the Michigan show. So he's
so he shipped everybody over.
He's like, it's like Michigan Part 2. Baz, what do you got? What type of questions do you have? Kind of concerns, comments? Because obviously, like I said, we're the newbies. We're going into this thing. And,
my thing is I don't know. I see all this, everybody's like, oh, well, is Oregon ready for 4 quarters of smash mouth in the trenches football, that we bring in the Big 10. And all I could think sometimes is like, I get it, we had a show, I don't know, earlier this summer where we were talking about the trenches and the difference. If this was Oregon coming into the Big 10 20 years ago, you got a problem. Oregon now, we built those trenches. I mean, I met Johnny Cornelius and Jonathan Connerly about a month or so ago at the spring game. And let me tell you, Johnny Cornelius is one big kid. I mean, he's all of 6'6", like 285. He's huge, humongous. And he looks like a tree, but he's just stock. And that's just a couple of our guys. And my thing that I always come back to with others is like, okay, are we ready for your trenches? But are you ready for the speed that we have here in Oregon? Kenyon Sadiq yesterday was clocked at 23.78 miles per hour.
Crazy.
23 miles per hour.
And that's a tight end.
As a tight end.
A tight end, yeah, a tight end.
I know, yeah.
That's a hybrid.
So,
that's a hybrid.
This is the battle. All right. I see it. Everything I put out there. It's West Coast fans coming in saying the Big 10 doesn't play any offense. Right. Of course, everybody looks to the Iowa Hawkeyes, what they were last year, the Big 10 West. Everybody, the Big 10, they don't play any offense, right? We can score up and down with them. And then you see traditional Big 10 fans that kind of echo the same sentiment, is that they don't have the big boys. They don't have the trench play to be able to stand up to what the Big 10 is. The best teams are going to meet in the middle. And I'm not saying this just because I'm on an Oregon Ducks program, but Oregon is that kind of mesh between the two. Right? Ohio State is a mesh between the two. We'll see if Michigan can be that, but you saw what they were last year. They could move the ball when they really had to. JJ McCarthy could make throws when he absolutely had to, and be able to move the football. But Oregon is kind of that meet in the middle. You mentioned the trench play that they have on the offensive line. Defensive line, you go out and you get a Big 10 guy in Derek Harmon from Michigan State. You get a Jamari Caldwell from Houston. And just the way Dan Lanning has been able to recruit as well at that position. There's a lot of guys within the pipeline. I think they got a guy in this year's class. Jericho Johnson was like, 260 pounds or something like that. He might play a couple of years down the road, but they're starting to build that. And a lot of people view that as, oh, it's Big 10. You got to be in the trenches. I don't care what conference you're in. You need great offensive and defensive line to win a national title. Look at Georgia and what they were able to do, right? Dan Lanning was the defensive coordinator in 2021. He knows all about that. That's probably where he was able, and he was on Alabama's staff, right? At a lower level position as well. So this is probably where he was able to say, we need a look at Clemson's defensive lines when they were able to win national championships as well. So I will say, I'll take it as a compliment that people view the Big 10 as that trenches type of conference, because I think that's what it takes to win at a higher level. Like you guys know, at Oregon, you guys have had explosive offenses year after year after year. But, maybe before Dan Lanning got there, you really weren't able to get over that hump. Now, maybe you're investing a little bit more into that trench play, that interior, and that kind of helps you run the football a little bit more effectively. That helps you stop the run, right? That's what we talk about. Run the ball, stop the run. That's what we need to win football games. That's what we need to win championships. And Oregon is really starting to adopt that mindset. Now you take that and you take that trench play, and now you have that great receiver room that we just talked about. We have that playmaking ability. You have a Heisman caliber quarterback in Dylan Gabriel. Those are the type of teams that are going to find success in this new Big 10. So for every Iowa that is out there that invests in the defense and doesn't have as much on offense, there's a USC with an explosive offense and not a lot of defense. So it goes both ways. Okay, there's no there's no Michigan and Iowa. That's the formula that you need to win the Big 10. There's no USC and Washington. That's the formula that you need to win the Big 10. It's going to be who meets in the middle the best. Right now, Oregon is that type of team. Ohio State, there's a reason why those two teams are slotted to play in Indy for a lot of people at the end of the year.
Yeah, and there's a reason those two teams are probably going to be 2-3, 3-4 going into Autzen in
Sure.
October.
Yeah, I would, at this point, we'll see. I have a feeling, my gut tells me pollsters will put Georgia number 1. And then where do you put Texas among those two? I think those are the 4 teams. Like when I look at it right now, and things can change, right? We know as the season goes along. But right now, there seem to be 4 teams that can win a title. Georgia and Texas from the SEC, Ohio State and Oregon from the Big 10. No, like we said, hey, Alex Orji or whoever at quarterback, right? Maybe they could be a lot better than we think. Right now, we know there's a lot of Michigan folks. They got a championship level defense. They've got we know that they got a good run game. One of the best tight ends in America. Who knows what happens at something like a Penn State in the Big 10 side. Maybe they can get an offensive explosion with Andy Kotelnicki coming in from Kansas. You look at the SEC side, Alabama, right? You know all about Kalen DeBoer. Maybe Kalen DeBoer can make Jalen Milroe a really good quarterback. And all of a sudden, Alabama is at that level once again. So there's other teams that are kind of on the fringes, but 2 from the SEC, 2 from the Big 10. Those are the teams that I kind of look at that seem to me to be championship level football teams. But so when we get to that point on October 12th, I would say top 5. It's a top 5 matchup at the very least. We'll see. I thought Georgia played Texas fairly early in the season. So one of those teams actually might have 1 loss at that point. Texas, I think, plays Oklahoma usually yearly early in October as well. Or that might be the 12th. That might actually be the same weekend.
I'll have to double check that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting exactly where these teams are ranked, but whoever comes out on top at Autzen Stadium, they are going to have, I think they could have a fast track to be number 1 in the country at that point in time.
Outside of like the Wisconsin game, because I think me and Spaz agree that will be that's going to be the interesting one. It's right before the final bye, and then we have to play Washington as our rival game.
Yep.
What other team on the schedule for Oregon do you think is going to be kind of that surprise team? Because we have to play like Illinois, Maryland. Let me see. Obviously, Ohio State, Michigan. Spaz, tell me. Obviously, UCLA, that counts as Big 10, but I'm not worried about UCLA.
Yeah. I mean, outside of the 3 trip-up games that I see.
Oh, Purdue.
Okay, let me tell you something. I'll answer your question here. Let me tell you something. Okay, there's a couple of Big 10 initiations that we all get at some point. As a Wisconsin fan, I know all about Northwestern. That is that pesky. I don't want to say little brother. That seems a little disrespectful. But that's that pesky neighbor that just finds a way to beat you, and you just don't know how it happened. Purdue. There's a reason why they call them the spoiler makers, right? This is a team, and that is a game. You're coming off of an emotional game against Ohio State. Whether you win the game, whether you lose the game, doesn't matter. And now you play on a short week. That's a Friday night game on Fox where you got to travel across the country to take on a Purdue team. Look, Purdue's not a great football team. I'll say that right off the bat right now. Okay, if I'm predicting right now, maybe they win 4 or 5 games, right? But they've got a really good quarterback in Hudson Card. They've got pieces, but I don't just know how their team gels together. But this is all. Here's what I will say about that spot is it has the makings of what Purdue has pulled in the past against the Ohio States of the world, against the top 5 Iowa at the time, against a Michigan State, right? They knocked off 2 top 5 teams, I believe, a couple of years back in Michigan State and Iowa. Ohio State in 2018 knocked them off by 20 plus points, right when Ohio State was a top 5 team in the country. They're the team that always finds a way to pull that big upset. It's college football, right? It's chaos. And I think the reason why I look at that game is exactly coming right off of that Ohio State game on a short week and traveling on the road. Right. So there's the makings for something like that. But this Oregon team seems to be one that will always kind of take care of that. Like Oregon is so much more talented than Purdue. But, sometimes in the Big 10, like we talk about Northwestern, those sleepy noon games, Purdue on the road, that's going to be a night game. That's an underrated atmosphere, I think, in this conference when the Ross Aid Brigade kind of comes out at night and everything's black, out there. So that's a little bit underrated as well. I look at the rest of this schedule. Maryland is an interesting one. I think Maryland this year you might see the best Maryland defense we've seen in a long time, which is saying something because their best defensive player, arguably, Jayshon Barham, he transfers to Michigan. He's going to be one of their starting linebackers out there, him and Ernest Hausman in the middle of that Michigan defense. They lose Tarheeb Still and Bo Braid, who are starters in that secondary. But it's a really good defense. Skill positions are good. Got to figure out what quarterback looks like post Taulia Tagovailoa out there. MJ Morris comes in from NC State. He's projected to be the starter. Maryland is that team that could start 6-0. They could start 7-0 early on in this schedule, and they might surprise some people. I put out a show a little bit ago about who could be some surprise teams, and Maryland was that team, especially if they can get out to a hot start. Like, they could easily start 6-0, and then that seventh game, I believe, was against USC, where the Trojans have to travel from coast to coast to take on that could take on a hot Maryland team at that point in time. And USC has a more difficult early season schedule, right? LSU's on the schedule. Michigan's on the schedule. I'd have to look at their schedule. Who else is on that point? I think Wisconsin is fairly early before they play Maryland. So that's something at that point. But yeah, Maryland is maybe another one of those teams that I would watch out for.
And Greg Schiano is a defensive specialist. So we all know the kind of defenses that he's put out over the years.
You're thinking Rutgers.
That's at Rutgers. Yep, that's at Rutgers. They don't. Thankfully,
you're thinking Mike Locksley now. Michael Locksley is Maryland.
well, Rutgers is a good team this year. Like, I could see Rutgers winning 8 games. I know that sounds like, for maybe folks that don't listen or don't take in a bunch of Big 10 football, maybe as much as I consume. Maybe that's a good way to put it, because I consume this stuff all the time. But Rutgers is that team. They could win 8 games and 9 games. They don't have Michigan. They don't have Penn State, Oregon, and Ohio State on the schedule. So the schedule kind of plays into some favors, but you mentioned the hard-nosed Greg Schiano. I love what he's building. They played the first college football game in 1869. One guy's been able to win at Rutgers, Greg Schiano. He did it when they were in the Big East. It looks like he's doing it in the Big 10.
Yeah. No, I have a great respect for Greg Schiano. I do. I that's it. We do avoid Rutgers too. So Oregon's schedule again sets up fairly nicely. Overall, what Spaz, do you have something else you want to go question wise?
What do you think of the recruiting aspect so far with what Oregon's been able to do in the Big?
Well, they were doing it before they joined the Big 10. Like, I'll just say that, but it's certainly going to help. Like, Dan Lanning is just an expert at formulating a roster. Like, recruiting is one thing, and he's been really good at that. But what he's been able to maneuver in the transfer portal in his short time in Eugene, Oregon, it's a who's who. Some of these really impact players, like Tez Johnson is a transfer from Troy, I believe. Jordan Birch is a transfer. Of course, Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel, like Bucky Irving transferred from Minnesota. Dante Moore. We talk about Derek Hart. Well, there's transfers all over the place. So I think when you talk recruiting, a lot of people, we've been hearing that for our lifetime. We think high school recruiting, but you also got to talk about transfer recruiting. Oregon has been as good as anybody in the transfer portal. Now, when you hear they've been as good as anybody, you think a lot of these classes for some of these teams, they bring in 20 transfers, they bring in 30 transfers, right, coming into a team. But that's not how he approaches it. He approaches it with quality because he knows he has that foundation that you mentioned on recruiting. He brings in 4-star guys, 5-star guys, and he wants to be able to develop them, of course. But if they're not up to speed, he's going to go out and he's going to find somebody that's going to go win him a championship in the transfer portal. And it's just crazy to me. You mentioned the quarterback. You mentioned Dante Moore. Like, it was peak Dan Lanning to say, oh, yeah, we lost a Heisman finalist, but we're going to pick up a guy who was top 10 in the country in passing in almost every category in Dylan Gabriel. Oh, and we're going to bring Dante Moore as well. Like, that was... Yeah. I had a feeling that that's where Dante could go. I know he's from Michigan, so you thought, hey, Wolverines might need a quarterback. Michigan State was in on his recruitment as a high schooler as well. There was kind of some other ones thrown out there as well. But talking about Dante Moore, I think this is good for Dante, right? Especially what happened. He had some ups and downs. Injuries played a part of that at UCLA last year. But for him to sit and learn this offense, that's going to do him so many big time. It's going to do him a lot of favors. No question about that. But yeah.
Well, and some things people don't recall about Dante Moore was he was committed to Oregon.
Oh, for the longest time.
Then Bo Nix came back, and Dante wanted to play right away, I think, was more the thing. So he's like, okay, UCLA is open. Then he realized, oh, it ain't that easy.
Well, yeah, it's they threw him
some
in
of it's
the fire.
NIL, some of it was NIL, I'm sure.
They threw him in there right away, and that UCLA situation was very interesting because it was very clear to, I think, early on when Dante Moore was able to tear it up in that game against Coastal Carolina early. It looked really good at the time for Bruin fans, but at the same time, now you look at it, hindsight is always 20/20, right? You look at it kind of in the rearview mirror, and you're kind of like, oh, that's almost the worst thing that could happen from a UCLA perspective, because he goes out there and he lights it up, and now that puts more pressure on Chip Kelly to get him in there sooner. And you could tell that when the competition got a little bit more stiff than Coastal Carolina, when you got into conference play, I'm not sure if he was ready. And then on the flip side, I'm not sure if this UCLA staff was the best staff there to be able to work through that adversity with him. What it screamed to me, it screamed a bag of cash near signing day with UCLA, to be perfectly frank with you. It is why that flip was made. You look at where Oregon was as a program, okay, and you look like he would have been on this team last year with Bo Nix as the quarterback, and he probably would have been able to slide right in. A year of development, learning the offense, he would have been able to slide in instead of them going out and get Dylan Gabriel. And that seemed to be a perfect situation, right? Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you stick with that? And then UCLA kind of comes in, and they've been okay, 8 wins here, 9 wins. Chip's been doing all right over there at UCLA, but then they kind of come in at the last minute. It screamed NIL, it screamed fishy to me at the last minute. So it's but this could be, props to Oregon for not getting too hurt, for the kind of spurning them at the last minute. That's I think Dan Lanning said it. I believe it was on Adam Breneman's show last year. He says there's no better time to finish second place in a recruiting battle than right now, right? And that's a lot. I'm a Wisconsin fan. Okay, there was a 4-star linebacker by the name of Tackett Curtis, played at USC last year. Wisconsin finished second. Okay, when he enters the portal after year 1, he's coming to Wisconsin. So just establishing and keeping those relationships very important when you talk about recruiting.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. Is like there was multiple scenarios or situations that made Dante Moore decommit, go to UCLA,
right?
But Lanning and the staff keeping communication and going, hey, and then him kind of learning the hard way of going, you know what? Yeah, maybe I wasn't ready.
Yeah,
right.
He basically admitted that this summer and was saying, I made him, basically said I made a mistake. And the best thing for me in creating my future and my legacy is to go sit somewhere and learn. And everybody's like, why would you do that? Why would you sit and learn? You've already been there and whatnot. Sometimes you got to learn the hard way and learn from the hard knocks and say, okay, let me take a step back and let me evaluate and learn, and then go show what I got.
Right, exactly. So this is, if we get a couple of years down the road and Dante Moore is lighting it up, it's going to make for a great redemption story. And I think that's what Duck fans, of course, are hoping for. So yeah, it's boy, I tell you what, that quarterback, they got that thing locked up for a long time. If everything kind of goes to a T with Dylan Gabriel this year, maybe Dante Moore for 2 years. You got Achilles Smith Jr. In the bag for the 25 class, right? So I know transfer portal exists, right? I'm not gonna say I'm immune to that, and things could happen maybe with Achilles on the backside of this. But man, they could have their quarterback situation in theory locked up until like 2028, 2028, which is insane in today's day and age.
Yeah, and I mean even this season, you look at it, you got Dylan Gabriel. Very obviously, he can become the most experienced quarterback in all of college football, surpassing Bo Nix.
Bo Nix, yeah.
Then you've got Dante Moore behind him, who has experience. And then in the spring game, you got to see Novosad, who was a highly touted. He redshirted last year. Then you've got this guy Moga, who really surprised me this last year with this spring game was running. He was like an RPO guy, and he was like a 3-star out of like Arizona, I believe, wasn't it, Spaz? I believe he's Arizona.
4-star Arizona, yeah.
And he's like the unknown. I don't think he'll get a shot, but I mean, the point, the quarterback room is loaded, but that's it. You have Akili Smith coming in next year, and then they're still recruiting quarterbacks.
Right. Yeah. So
are not hesitant.
I'd have to think about this maybe more in depth, but there's so many coaches. We saw Nick Saban retire because he kind of saw where college football and the direction that it was going. And maybe, you see Dabo Swinney not taking any transfers. He's going out there and saying nobody can play for us, in the transfer portal, stuff like that, which I don't have a huge problem necessarily with that. If that's like, it's like the NFL, like, do you want to build by the draft? Do you want to build by free agency, a combination? It's interesting to see how each roster is certainly built. Clemson wants to build by the draft, and that's fine. But it's this in the new age of college football, with balancing the roster between those two things, and then being able to go out and fundraise and get NIL backing, right? It's Dan Lanning might be as good as anybody for this new wave of college football coaches coming in and structuring a roster, because there's some schools out there that are already implementing general managers to kind of take care of this behind the scenes type of stuff. I think that's going to be normalized when we get rev sharing, right? Maybe in a few years, right? Where we have some sort of salary cap sort of things, but there's going to be coaches like, you remember Bill Belichick was the coach of GM for forever for the New England Patriots. Dan Lanning could be that guy that can tackle both responsibilities. So I think he's kind of doing that right now.
Your girlfriend as his GM.
Oh boy, that's something. That's something. I don't think Bill is going to live to 110, but what's going on right now is screaming midlife crisis. That's what I'll say about that. That's what I'll say about that.
I do like the praise that I think it's deserved, and that's not just bias as an Oregon fan, but like you just talked about earlier too, the Ducks versus them, getting the behind the scenes of the Lanning speeches during the games.
Yeah,
I mean, some of those are like, yo,
they do it different. I love the way they do those videos, because almost every college now, like, you're not doing it right if you don't have a video or creative department putting out cinematic highlights after you win a football game. Okay, almost every school in the Big 10 does it. Not everybody does it on YouTube. Some do it on Twitter or whatever. But the way he implements coaches' headset communication, the communication between Will Stein and himself and stuff, like I thought it was the USC one where you saw a lot of that. And then you look at the preparation and the coaches' meetings, just the way they incorporate everything in the storytelling, right, is just I love it. I think they do those cinematic highlights better than anybody, right? Because they incorporate the week of leading up to it. They incorporate practice. They incorporate headset communication and all of that. And for someone who has had to edit videos on a deadline, I can't imagine what their editing timeline looks like and how quickly that they have to kind of put that thing together. So
that's a lot of
mad respect. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot of material to go through and adjust everything. So something with that is you just mentioned the headset stuff. So is this next year headset allowed for quarterbacks and the central linebacker?
Yep. So we got a couple of green dots. We got a green dot. If you watch the NFL, you got the green dot on the back of the helmet. Basically, there's one player designated on each side of the football. Obviously, quarterbacks. It's going to be on the offensive side of the ball. Most of the time, it's middle linebacker for defense. Although that can change sometimes. You could see a safety At that point, you could see, but most of the time it's that quarterback of the defense, that linebacker in the middle that's kind of overlooking everything. So basically, what will happen is, when the play blows dead, play clock kind of starts up. The headset, the speaker in the helmet will be activated. And then it gets cut off. I believe it gets cut off with 15 seconds on the play clock, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's what they said, because they were testing
15?
it during the spring games, and I wasn't sure if they were going to, and also the bowl games, but they were for some teams, not all teams during the bowl games.
Which is why, because this always is like the conversation surrounding this is always going to come back to Michigan and the Connor Stallions thing that kind of happened this year. There's still going to be some sort of signals, I think, because after that headset communication does cut off, like you even see that in the NFL. Right, where certain things need, once you get past that time, maybe you have a quarterback that's not ultra experienced, and he's kind of looking to the sidelines for a play, So it doesn't happen a lot, I will say, but you might have those kinds of things and that kinds of stuff as well. So so it's that's something that's going to be interesting. Like that, they got to have this communication figured out, because if you don't have that communication figured out, I think you're going to you might be behind a little bit. So
I hope teams keep the signs regardless, because that's just a college football thing, is those wacky signs.
It's certainly creative, and I'm curious to see how each team really kind of changes with the time. So it's going to be fun. It's certainly going to be fun to see how everything adapts throughout time this year.
Yeah, they want to GWG wants to ask you, what do you think of Oregon's defense against Oregon State, Michigan, and Iowa?
Boy, the Big 10, you want to talk about defenses. The Big 10 is the conference of defenses. I think the best defenses in the country are Georgia and what you see on the screen. That's the list. Now, I think Michigan and Ohio State are in a tier by themselves at the top of the Big 10 when it comes to defenses. When you talk about Michigan and Ohio State defensive lines, I put this out on Twitter a few weeks back. Flip a coin. I said at the time I'd side Ohio State. Sometimes it depends on what side of the bed I wake up on, whether Michigan or Ohio State's defensive line is better. I think Ohio State's D-line is fantastic on the outside. You look to the inside, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are just, how do you block these guys? I don't know how you blocked them last year, and now you get another year. It's just like, man, your head explodes on this, and Michigan's got a great secondary as well. So I'll put those guys at the top. To me, man, this is crazy to say. I think Oregon and Penn State are maybe in that next tier as well. I'd probably actually put Oregon I think I'd put them above Penn State. Iowa, man, but putting Iowa, what would that be? 5th in the conference on defense just doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel right because of what they have coming back this season. Like when you look at all these defenses, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Penn State, Iowa, Nebraska, that's 6 right off the bat. There's a chance those could be like 6 of, say, the top 12 defenses in the country next season. So, and there's some others, that I didn't even mention in there as well. But if you're asking me to rank them, and I'm going to try to do it because I was asked to, I'll go Ohio State, Michigan. I'll go, oh boy, Oregon, Penn State, Iowa, Nebraska. That's just off the top of my head. I haven't really ranked them, done any power rankings yet, but that's kind of how I see it going down. Man, Nebraska at 6. Like that, basically with an 18-team conference, that's basically an above-average defense. And Nebraska's a lot better than an above-average defense. I'll just say it like that. That's how loaded this conference is. Unlike Rutgers is a really good defense as well. They're not, when you look at average, right? In theory, average is the middle, right? They don't seem to be like an average defense to me. Like you could have Rutgers be let's call it the 8th ranked defense in the Big 10, which wouldn't surprise me considering the list of defenses that we have. And they could be like I said, 8th in the Big 10. They could be like top 20 in the country. That would not be surprising whatsoever. It's crazy the amount of defense that's in this conference this year.
Yeah, that's one thing we were talking about last year with defenses was from 2022. We said, hey, that defense got to improve. And about halfway through the season, we were like technically top 10 overall defense. And we knew it was gonna adjust as we played like USC and other teams like that. And it dropped, of course, in certain areas, or like Washington a second time, et cetera, et cetera. But the improvement was significant. You're gonna have those offenses that you're gonna have those kind of struggle fests with. You're going to.
And here's the thing about some of these pack defenses. And I'll throw USC into this as well. Or like Oregon's schedule this year, and I actually got it in front of me here once again. Like you look at the Pac-12 last year, they were loaded on offense. They were the best offensive conference. I'd even take it one step further. They were probably the deepest conference in college football. I really think like when you look at teams towards the bottom, I'm looking at a Washington State who beat my Wisconsin Badgers in the Palouse last year. Like I thought they were pretty good, especially earlier in the season. Maybe they dropped off a little bit. Like those types of teams kind of at that point in time. You could say what you want about Colorado, but Shadur Sanders was a great quarterback. They had some really good weapons on offense, and that was a team that ended up going 4-8 last season as well. But when I look at kind of getting back to this, when I look at Oregon's schedule for this year, I think they could take a step up statistically because they don't play a lot of those really good offenses that we're known for kind of in the Pac-12. Like when you look at their big, we know the non-conference, Idaho, Boise State, Oregon State. Conventional wisdom says they're going to be defensively, they're going to fare pretty good in those football games. But when you look at, especially early, UCLA and Michigan State, UCLA's got a pretty good receiving core. But they're a lot like I kind of look at Purdue, like I look at UCLA. I see some pieces, but I just don't see an entire football team. With the Bruins, it wouldn't be surprising if they held UCLA under 20 points, 17 points, something like that. Michigan State, they don't have a lot on the outside at receiver. Ohio State, we know what they are. Michigan, here's the thing about Michigan. I love you. I love John. I love Big Blue Nation. Big Blue is Kentucky. But that's a whole different discussion. Go Blue, right? Instead of Big Blue Nation. But when you talk about Michigan, right, they're not a team that maybe is going to put up a ton of yards or a ton of points. They're going to kind of suck you into playing football their way. They might score 24 points, but that might be good enough to win a football game because of the physical style and defensive style of football they play. But point I'm trying to make here in a roundabout way is I look at these offenses and it's maybe not as deep as maybe what they've played the last couple of years. Like I think USC is going to take an uptick on defense just because they don't have to play a lot of some of those high-powered Pac-12 offenses as well. Now, I think USC will improve with their coaching staff. They're much improved in the secondary as well. I think that's another reason why. But I think, I got to give the Pac-12 some props. Like this was they went out on top, man, right? What they were so deep and they were so powerful offensively with some of these great quarterbacks. It was really fun to watch. So I think because of that, you're going to see some of these Pac-12 defenses maybe not take it on the chin so much with a lot of these yards and points given up.
It was funny. The potentially one of the deepest times the league has been in a decade was their final year.
I mean, I'm thinking because the Big 10 and Pac-10/12 have had a relationship, the Rose Bowl relationship, of course, for all of these years. So that's kind of a conference that I've maybe paid attention to, maybe more than the SEC, ACC, Big 12, things like that as well. So here's what I will say. So I've kind of kept my eye on that a little bit. Like, I think, and you guys please correct me if I'm wrong, because I very well may be. I think of like when USC was like 08, 09, 10, when their run, they were still pretty good, but when their run was kind of fading out, but Oregon started to step up and Jim Harbaugh at Stanford were really good as well. I thought there were some other teams for maybe some other schools in there. There was some Washington.
Cal was pretty good.
Cal, thank you, Cal. Aaron Rodgers, Marshawn Lynch. Some of these players that were
Tedford. He took Cal.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel
Yeah.
like that late 2000s, early 2010s, maybe outside from this last season, that was really the heyday of the Pac-10 and the Pac-12 at that point. It was extremely deep.
Shaw had some good teams there for a few years.
Yeah. Yeah, Shaw after Harbaugh, that they had some really good teams, some Rose Bowl teams in there as well. So they had some good years in that period of time.
I can answer the super chat.
Yeah, I was going to say, Spaz, this is all you. So Michigan, Blue Wolverine, once again, super chatting. Thank you very much. Michigan has Mr. Brightside and announcing Slippery Rock scores as traditions. What Oregon traditions are there other than fan bases that other fan bases may not know? Spaz, please spew your old age knowledge.
It never rains in Autzen Stadium.
Okay, can you explain that to me? Because all I know about the Pacific Northwest is that it rains. Like that's all. And I've heard that there's I forgot who it was. There's a podcast. I think is that Hifladay's podcast. It never rains. There's on this.
I think that might be Hifladay or we had him on our show a few months ago. Spaz. They have Hifladay on there a lot. God, was that? Quack 12 podcast.
Quack 12 podcast.
Yeah, they have Hifladay on there a lot. Yeah.
I don't know. So please explain that to me, how apparently it never rains in Oregon.
So Don Essick, who's the legendary announcer for Autzen Stadium, been doing it for, 50 plus years now, I believe. I think this is his 53rd year. But he, there was a game years ago and somebody said something about rain, and Don says it never rains at Autzen Stadium. It seems to be, it could be pouring buckets, and 90% of the time during a football game in Oregon, in Eugene, the rain will stop. As soon as the game is over, it'll start dumping or whatever. But there is a good majority of the time, it'll be rain all week, all day, all night. But when it's game time, it just stops raining.
Wow. That's crazy. I did not know that.
But there are some nights that it just very wet.
Yeah, I was about to say 2012 or 2013 against Cal, where it was literally a monsoon. They were sliding across the field in puddles.
Mariota's just sliding. Like he goes to run out of bounds and he just slides 10 yards across the field,
It was a disaster on TV. Well, Big 10 Ted, I know you had a time limit tonight.
Let's go 10 more minutes. What do you say? Let's do 10 more minutes if you got it.
That's fine. I was gonna.
I know. We started a little bit late, so yeah. So we can do.
That's my fault to everyone. Sorry, there was a bunch of technical difficulties on my end. For some reason, StreamYard hates me, and my mic system hated me tonight. I don't know what's going on. Spaz, do you have another final question on your end? Because then I have the final question.
Yeah. So
for Ted, and we'll leave it at that.
You doing all of what you do now, Ted?
Yeah, good question. Like I said before, I kind of worked in media before. My career really started in radio back in 2010 when I was 19 years old, right after I graduated high school. I worked for a local radio station doing play-by-play of local high school, hosted a morning show, sales, anything you could think of to really get my foot in the door when it came into broadcasting at a local level. Eventually kind of went and said, you know what, radio's cool and all, but I want to be on television. So I decided to transfer up to a great school here in Minnesota, St. Cloud State, graduated from there. They've got a great TV program over there. And then, like I said, my first job was in Fargo, North Dakota. Had a great time covering sports up there for a while for the Fox affiliate up there. Had a fantastic time. Bison football, University of North Dakota hockey up in Grand Forks, which has a fantastic program as well. So that's kind of how I got started. I did that for 2 years, and then I kind of transitioned away from broadcasting or on-air career. And then I kind of got to more behind the scenes where I'm at now, of television production, of the sports media business, so to speak. And I kind of got the itch to kind of talk about it again. And college football has always been the passion for me, right? My first memories as a kid, sports memories, is Ron Dane and the Wisconsin Badgers, Barry Alvarez winning back-to-back Rose Bowls in the 98, 99, 99, 2000 seasons, beating UCLA and Stanford. And really ever since then, college football has been my passion in life. And I grew up in the Midwest, so it's Big 10 college football, right, has been my passion. So obviously Wisconsin is kind of my fandom first, but man, sell me Purdue and Northwestern and I'll buy it. Sell me Iowa and Northwestern last year at Wrigley Field, a 10-7 final, and I am eating up all 60 minutes of that. Okay, people say Iowa is boring. Iowa is exciting because every play feels like the Super Bowl. Every play feels like this could change a game. If Deacon Hill throws it for 10 yards, this thing is going to completely flip on its head. So that's where I kind of started. And then I started in 2020, right? Nothing was kind of going on, COVID. I kind of started it. It didn't really gain a lot of traction. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I did a video. I guess they were shorter at that time. I did a video on conference realignment. And this is crazy because this was back in like 2020, as I said. I said and this is so funny to talk about now with being on an Oregon program. I said, you know what? The next Big 10 ads, this is when we were at 14, right? The next Big 10 ads are going to be about basketball. It's going to be Kansas and Virginia. I know I sound like an idiot, saying that now, but then Texas and Oklahoma joined the SEC, and that video got a lot of traction. All of a sudden, I'm getting notifications on my phone. Subscriber. I'm like, what is happening? And I'm like, oh, it's from this video, because they were connected, YouTube, it's related type of stuff. And then I'm like, you know what? Let's give it another try. And that was right before the 2021 season. Started doing game previews, game reactions, and it started to gain a little bit more traction. And eventually I got into some longer form stuff, and then previews of the season and just all this other stuff. It kind of started to build and kind of started to steamroll. Now I'm on the audio platforms as well. So that's kind of how things manifested right now. And I just saw that comment come through. That's why I started. There goes my mic. That's why I started. Jared's my guy. All things Buckeyes here right now. So I record right before I came on here. I recorded my Nebraska Cornhuskers season preview show with John Johnston of Corn Nation. I didn't really have time to change my shirt. So this is why
he hasn't bought Oregon gear yet. That's why.
I do. Well, I do have an Oregon. I know. I didn't have time. It went a little bit long, so I just had to log on to this right away. I was a plan to don. I actually have two. I have an Oregon. I don't know how I found this. I had an Oregon shirt from back in the day, right? It's an older kind of typeface as well. But yeah, then I was able to have I got some newer apparel as well. So
grass is dead and green in Eugene yet?
I don't have that one. I would love that. So the Oregon, you can look back at like a video, or I forgot when I wore the shirt, but a lot of people are saying we need to get you better gear. I'm hearing a lot of that because I'm wearing shirts and apparel now for teams, which I think is a good little spin on things. And people are saying we need to get you cleaner gear. So might have to set up a PO box of some kind. Maybe people.
That's it.
Yeah, maybe people can send some stuff to spice up the backdrop and apparel and stuff. So I'm open to that. That might be something that might have to happen here with community support going down. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got started in all of this, growing up in the state of Wisconsin. Just an hour north of Madison. Like my parents in Madison, Wisconsin, they're on the Capitol Square. They have the farmers market every single Saturday. My parents,
The end of the show and you finally show up. You're fired.
My parents have been selling fresh produce at the Madison Farmers Market for 30 years. It's the second biggest farmers market in the country. And every Saturday, and it's on Saturdays, every Saturday, the Wisconsin band and all things Badgers they used to have this little processional towards Camp Randall Stadium, which is about a little less than a mile away from where that was. So fall Saturdays are very special to me in Madison, Wisconsin. Madison is the best college town in America. That is a hill I will die on. There are many hills I will die on, and that is one of them. I love Madison. It's great. And, being able to do that, like I have a lot of friends and none of them really watch college football. And it's crazy because I've kind of gone through various stages of friends, and everybody does in their life. And I'm like, man, how can nobody like college football? So having this outlet, talking to people like you and being guests, it's a lot of fun. I know that was a long, drawn out kind of explanation, but that's what it is.
That's like one of my season ticket friends. She's like, we were at the spring game and we were talking in the stands, and she's like, I don't understand some of these men I try to date and they don't like football. And he's like, if you don't like football, you're not the man for me. You got to go.
Oh, that's such a great thing. Come fall, Sam's will be busy. I get to just enjoy college football and doing the post-game shows and shit. And that's all I have to worry about during fall. Thank you. He freed up my schedule.
So how many Saturdays did you run from that farmer's market?
Oh my gosh. Oh, well, here's the story kind of behind that. When I was younger, I used to help, I helped set up, and then I'd help with customers and stuff. And then the marching band would go by, Bucky Badger riding on the little float and everything, and I'd get kind of distracted by that. And then there were times a little bit later when I got older, I would become more of a nuisance and annoying around my parents' booth than helpful. So a lot of times I would set up, and then once it was time for customers to kind of walk through, it's like, Ted, just go walk around and we'll see you in a few hours, kind of a thing. So that's kind of how it went. I've logged so many miles, not only, walking to Camp Randall or everything, but just all of the going down State Street and all of the Regent Street and all of the surrounding areas around Madison. So yeah, I know that town very well. It's been a minute since I've been there. So maybe I'll have to make it back for that Alabama-Wisconsin game that you got there down there in that comment. But yeah, so yeah, that's kind of how all that all shook out.
Prediction on Bama, Wisconsin. How close do you think it'll
be? My
Ooh.
Gosh.
Okay,
here's what I will say. If you're ever going to get Alabama, get them at home and get them the year after Nick Saban retires. Wisconsin got them at the perfect time, right? Plain and simple, they do. I think Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. I've heard some reports coming out of Tuscaloosa that say things are going pretty well, but between him and Jalen Milroe, I think that Wisconsin pass defense is going to be tested. But this is such a proof, because I think a lot of people, Wisconsin has kind of been that program that a lot of people said, yeah, they've been historically good. They've made a bowl game for 20 some odd straight years, right? They were so used to them going 8, 9, 10 wins type of thing with Barry Alvarez, the Brett Bielema, Paul Christ, and all that. And now these last 2 years, they went 6-6. They fired Paul Christ. And then last year, 7-6. People are more down on the Badgers right now. What an opportunity for people to kind of prove the doubters wrong, because a lot of people, Big Noon Saturday on Fox is rolling into town. I think a lot of people are expecting Alabama to roll. And Wisconsin, this is an opportunity for them to say, we're still that big brand. We're still that team that people should respect in the Big 10. I can't wait to see exactly how this game goes down. I think this game is going to be closer than people think. I think a lot of people are looking at Wisconsin's schedule, maybe myself included, and looking at, man, you got Bama on the schedule. You got Oregon, you got Penn State, you got USC, you got all these tough teams on the schedule, along with Nebraska and Minnesota and, some of your rivals. They're looking at 7-5 again, but just watch out for Wisconsin. I think they're a little bit of a sleeper, surprisingly, right now, considering how many times that experts have
And that
picked them
game
to win
is
the Big
early
10 West.
too, isn't it? Like
It's a noon kickoff on Fox. Yeah.
Is it like what, second week?
It is week 3. They play South Dakota and Western Michigan before that at Camp Randall.
Yeah, I knew it was early in the season, so that's another advantage.
It is.
No, go ahead.
Well, yeah. Having, like I said, early, get them at home, get them the year after Nick Saban retires, and get them early, right? When they're still trying to figure things out, right? And maybe Jalen Milroe is still trying to get a hold on this offense, and maybe some pieces are moving. And you know how a season, like last year at Alabama, Jalen Milroe didn't really take over until middle of the year and really establish himself at Bama. So he got benched. A lot of people, they went through a lot of quarterbacks early in the year last year at Alabama. So maybe they're still trying to figure things out. I think that's where Wisconsin needs to be. They need to hope, I think, that Alabama is not running on all cylinders, right, by a couple of weeks into the season, and that this thing is still fairly contained. So we'll see. We'll see. It all comes down to Tyler Van Dyke. What kind of quarterback is he going to be? Okay, is he going to be the guy that's going to go out there and spin it like he did early in his career, or is this going to be a guy that was maybe a little bit inconsistent like later?
Spaz did that, but I'm like, Tyler Van Dyke's not dealing with Mario Cristobal now. That's the difference. Look at Justin Herbert and Mario Cristobal and NFL. Totally different. I know we're on the time limit here, and now I'm splitting between 2 questions because there was 2 questions I had, but
go for it.
Oh God, no! This is gonna be a long-winded one if I ask you this one.
I'll try to keep it short.
The Big 10 is full of so many rivalries that we have to learn all of them. Do you think it's important to maintain rivalries like Oregon State's maintaining?
Now
absolutely. Non-con.
Absolutely. The Big 10, I thought, has done a really good job with scheduling and protecting the must-protect rivalries, the trophy games, right? We have a lot of great trophies and great history within this conference. And I think that's important, right? When you expand and you expand and expand, there's been rumors of Southeastern schools maybe coming into the Big 10 in a few years. And there's always going to be rumors of expansion now, right? With maybe, the ACC might get gobbled up here pretty soon. But I think as conferences, especially the Big 10 and the SEC, continue to expand, it's important to keep those historical rivalries. You talk about other rivalries that were in the Pac-12 that are not. I think Oregon and Washington did realignment as good as anybody, right? Keeping Oregon State, keeping Washington State on the non-conference schedule, and then making the Oregon-Washington game at the end of the year, which this was a surprise to me. I thought Oregon and Oregon State, Washington State were like the arch rivals. It turns out Oregon and Washington is maybe more of a rivalry for each school, and it's more like a Michigan State is a lot like Oregon and Oregon State as well. So that was good to know, and I'm glad that big rivalry is at the end of the season. So you look at Oklahoma; they don't play Oklahoma State anymore. I know they're reunited in the SEC, but Texas at first did not play Texas A&M when those two went their separate ways. In conferences. So Missouri and Kansas, right? They broke up when Missouri left for the SEC in the early 2010s. So I love to see Oregon and Oregon State and the Apple Cup still on the schedule. So I think that is important as we continue to expand.
I just wish we would have put it at the end like normal.
Yeah, we have to adjust to that. I mean, it is what it is. Maybe we can adjust that later on. We're not USC. We can't have favoritism and schedule.
Yeah, if you have a big significant rival, the Big 10 is all about playing that at the end of the season. So it's probably gonna be Oregon and Washington for the foreseeable future.
And I found out from an Oregon alum at the spring game this year, it was. I thought the Civil War, Oregon State, was always the big rivalry. To most of the players, at least in the Chip Kelly era, when he played, the Oregon-Washington meant more to them than the Oregon State.
Yeah, I'm really glad that and that's what I've heard as well. I'm really glad then that rivalry is being elevated, being played at the end of the season, and Oregon State and the Apple Cup are being played.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. because Washington is a huge rival, obviously for historical reasons, not just besides Oregon State. I'll give you the final question, Ted. You run with this, and then you just go, here's my statement, I bounce. And you don't have to hear any of the comments or the negative feedback.
Oh, come on. I can take it. I can take it. I'm Midwestern tough, baby. I'm Midwestern tough.
Do you think Oregon will run
Thick
the
skin
table?
comes from youth.
Do you think Oregon will run the table in the Big 10 and win the conference this year?
No, I do not. I do not think. I think they're going to lose at some point. I don't know if it's going to be Ohio State. It could be. Michigan is somebody that a lot of people nationally are overlooking right now. I think because of what's going on at quarterback, replacing their entire offensive line as well. Michigan, first week in November, that could be a little bit tricky on the road at Michigan. You guys mentioned Wisconsin, but I think Oregon has a more talented roster than the Wisconsin Badgers. I will put it this way, maybe. I would be surprised if the Oregon Ducks go 9-0 going into Indianapolis. I wouldn't say I would be shocked. I would just be surprised, just because having Ohio State and Michigan, having a couple of the big boys on the schedule, it wouldn't surprise me if they boat race, Purdue and Illinois and Maryland and some of these other, kind of mid-tier Big Ten programs. But if they beat, because that's the thing about the thing about Oregon, right? And you guys maybe know it better than anybody. Big games, right? You look at these rivalry games under Dan Lanning, what they've won. Wow, I forgot the record. 1-4 against Washington and Oregon State. Something that might be not right, but it was something similar to that over his first 2 years. Got to win big games. What has Dan Lanning done? Has he won a big game? Well, he's going to get an opportunity to. I think that they're going to. Boy, it's tough. They could lose to both of them. I have a feeling they win one of them. My gut tells me Ohio State, but I think Ohio State is probably the better and maybe more complete of the two football teams. So I don't know. I think it's going to be tough. A lot of people are saying Ohio State and Oregon make it to Indy. I'm not sure if it's that simple. I think Penn State is a lot better on offense than I think people are anticipating this season. They still got a really good defense. Yeah. That's what I will say about that. I do not think they go undefeated this year. Like, that would be unprecedented for a team to go to a new conference and just clean up like that, right? Even when Penn State joined in 1993, they went 10-2. Wisconsin won the Big 10 that year. Now, the next year, they went undefeated and won the Big 10. But yeah, I don't know about Oregon stepping in right away, playing those types of teams right off the bat. I don't know. That's just the way I see it.
I see 8-1.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't see
8-1. I could see 8-1, and I could see it either way. I could see a win over Ohio State and a loss to Michigan. I could see them, and I could see it going the other way as well. And what if something happens like they beat both of them, but then like lose to Wisconsin or something like that a little bit later, because Wisconsin would be after the Michigan game.
That's typical Oregon fashion right there.
They might go out and say,
Arizona
what, we beat Ohio State. We beat Michigan, right? Oh man, we're at the top of the world. Maybe we're number one in the country. And then a team like a Wisconsin kind of bites them, right? But they still make it to the Big Ten championship. And the thing about today's day and age, I think, of college football is that you don't need to win your league anymore. You can win it, lose a couple of games. You can lose 2 or 3 games. You can still go and win a national championship. Like Ohio State is in kind of that boat. And I talked about this on a previous show. On my side is, what if Ohio State like loses to Michigan for the 4th consecutive year? Let's say they go 10-2 and lose to Oregon. They don't make it to the Big Ten championship. So they don't beat Michigan again for the 4th straight year. They don't win the Big Ten title, but they could get a playoff spot easily at 10-2 and run the table and win a national championship. Now, you'll take a national championship every single time, every single year, but it kind of feels a little bit weird not winning the Big Ten title, not beating Michigan. They'll take it, but it'll feel a little bit funky not getting off the schneid against the Wolverines. But that's what this new era is going to bring us.
Yeah, it is. Well, Big 10 Ted, we appreciate you taking your time, especially after you just did another recording. We appreciate you
it's
being
been busy,
here.
man.
Spaz, whatever, Spaz. Yeah, you're always here. I will say, I'm going to give Big 10 Ted his final comments here, but please, everyone here, all the Oregon fans, especially, I know we have a lot of Big 10 people in here right now, but for the Oregon fans, if you don't know who this man is, his YouTube and Twitter are in the description section of this video. Please go follow him. If you want to know anything about Big 10, he's the man to talk to. He's knowledgeable about all teams, not just Wisconsin or Oregon. He's already very knowledgeable on Oregon already, and we haven't even played a Big 10 game. So
Yeah,
please do go follow him. Links are in the description at the top of the description section. So go click those, follow him there. Ted, any final comments here? But before I get that, sorry about that. I clicked it at the same time I was saying it. But Gerard Jones.
Look at that. Coming in clutch.
Yeah. Super chats only help the channel and Mark Rogers, so we appreciate that highly. But great show, fellas. Great seeing Big 10 Ted on here. Appreciate you guys. Big 10 is going to be fire this year. I think it's going to be a great year. I think it's going to be exciting.
It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be so much like usually in years past, there were weeks where I'm like, I was saying this to somebody else recently after I recorded something. And I'm like, there were weeks, I know there's going to be a lot of people that might not like this comment, but I'm going to say it anyway, that there were going to be weeks where I'm like, you know what? I think I could go apple picking with the wife this weekend. We've got Indiana Northwestern. We've got, this is no disrespect to any of these programs, by the way, right? It's just the way the schedule kind of shakes out sometimes. Michigan taking on whoever, they're going to boat race them, Ohio State, whoever, so I'm like, you know what? Maybe I could take this weekend off. Not this year, man. There are loaded, and this is what the TV networks wanted, right? They wanted big games every single week, so people like me couldn't go apple picking with their wives. That's what they wanted. That was their motivation, right? So, but yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys for having me on. Big 10 Ted over there on YouTube, also on Twitter at Big 10 Ted. I like to use Twitter as kind of to interact with a lot of people, get a lot of discussion kind of going as well. And it kind of helps me gauge kind of what content people want to see as well. You can look at Big 10 Ted on Spotify. If you're an audio only version, I got to get that thing on Apple Podcasts eventually. Still haven't done that, but I got to be able to do that. And coming up, there might not be a ton of content the next couple of weeks, but starting the day College Football 25 comes out, which I'm sure a lot of people are excited about, on July 19th. July 19th, mark your calendars, not only for College Football 25, but mark your calendars for the beginning of 18 straight days of Big 10 football previews. I am kicking things off with Clayton Safey from the Wolverine over at On3. We're kicking things off with the defending champs Michigan on July 19th. That is the very first preview over there. I've got team experts and guests from the On3 network, from 24/7 Sports, from Rivals, and from a lot of team podcasts and websites and reporters as well. You're talking deep dives, in-depth position of breakdowns, overviews, schedules, ceilings, expectations. I was talking to you guys offline. There might be a super duper marathon of all of these previews back to back, a live stream. It might be 8 hours long. So although maybe the next couple of weeks is a lot of work recording these previews, editing these previews, and all these things, once these things drop starting July 19th with the Michigan Wolverines, it is going to be just nonstop coverage until the start of the season. So I'm really excited for people to see this because I've been putting a lot of effort, research, and work booking these guests and kind of working around. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for people to see it. So that's what we got coming up on the channel. It's going to be a lot of fun. Once again, guys, thanks for having me on. It's always great to talk Big Ten and Oregon football.
Absolutely. And I am so happy you brought up the college football 25 because I'm like, I got to pre-order
10 years, man. 10 years, man. That's something. You know, there's so much. It's crazy the amount of anticipation for this game right now. It's I won't be getting it, but I will say this. For any viewers out there that are looking for maybe to put together a, people like to live stream their video game. If you want to, I will lend my talents for if you want to kind of turn off Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit and you want to turn on Big Ten Ted for the announcing portion of it, I'll be willing to do that as well. So that's kind of one thing that I've been able to have some discussions with. So if you want me to call your Kennesaw State dynasty, I'd be happy to do so. Stop.
Why does everyone keep bringing up Kennesaw and Merrimack? I'm so tired of it. I brought up on a Sunday night show Kennesaw and Merrimack, and no one will stop talking about it. So tired of it. Okay. Anyway, enough about those two teams. Yeah, I'd love that. But yeah, Big Ten Ted, we appreciate you. Again, everyone, please, in the description section below, please go follow Big Ten Ted, especially Oregon fans who need more knowledge on the Big Ten, as all of us do, because, again, this is a whole different reality we're going to be in. And, yeah, I mean, we have to adjust and we have to learn about the Big Ten culture and the Big Ten rivalries and all the history of the Big Ten more and more.
Can't wait. Also, one last thing. I said this before when I was out in Colorado on vacation, hiking all the way up to beautiful Bierstadt Lake in Rocky Mountain National Park. I decided to whip out my phone and post on YouTube, and I said, don't wish your summer away. Okay, we love college football. We want it here right now, but this is a great time to get outside. It's a great time to go hike a mountain. It's a great time to refresh because there's a lot of people on the Twitter sphere in June that are arguing about God knows what. And sometimes I just want to type out, go touch some grass, climb a mountain, get outside, spend some time with the family. Because once September comes around, man, you are going to be dialed. I'm going to be dialed in. You're going to be dialed into college football. I'm excited to take a trip up to the Pacific Northwest to the state of Washington. So just get outside, man. And it's great. I live in Minnesota Lake Country. It's great to be out there. It's great to go out to the west to see the mountains and have some fun. But yeah, college football is waiting for us. Right on August 31st, Minnesota kicks off against North Carolina on a Thursday night on Fox to kick things off. So it'll be there. Now is a good time, even if it's just for a couple of days or a week. Refresh your brain so you're not just zeroed in on things 24/7. It's a great way. I felt so refreshed after I came back from Colorado. It allowed me to kind of really put a lot of my focus and allowed my brain to be better.
Where are you going in Washington?
Washington. It's my first 2-weeker. We're going up to North Cascades National Park area. We're coming down to the Olympics and the Olympic National Park for a couple of days, and then finishing up at Mount Rainier before going home, camping out on the ocean for a few nights in there as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of looking forward to it. So
there you go. Well, gentlemen, Big Ten Ted, Spaz. We didn't even have a ranting with Spaz segment tonight. I don't want to have one. Anyways, Big Ten Ted.
We got a quick one.
No. Big Ten Ted, Spaz, I will remove you from the show. Both of you, especially Big Ten Ted, as the guest of honor here tonight, to teach us about Big Ten. All the chat, all the super chats, especially you guys, again, helps the show a lot. We appreciate it a lot. And we will be seeing more of you in the future of the Big Ten. So join us in now 2 weeks, Spaz, right? We're going to take next week off unless we have another guest.
Yep.
We'll do an impromptu show. Yeah, unless we have another guest. So, Big Ten Ted, we appreciate all the time you had tonight and you
Yeah.
gave us. And again, everyone, please check out the description in the description section, his links. Check him out, follow him, and we will see you guys here on the Oregon channel at the Voice of College Football in 2 weeks to talk more Oregon football going to the Big 10. So thank you, everyone, and have a good night. And go Ducks always.
That's right.